Do the Royals need to pull the plug on this player? We'll find out who next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Time for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you are able to download your podcast. Very simple. We seem to have a lot of traction on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, of course, but we're also on YouTube. We're now up to over 1,500 subscribers, about a 1,200 subscriber increase, I would say, since taking over on this podcast. Maybe a little bit less than that, but around that ballpark, I guess I should say there. But lots of great numbers over the last 8 months or so. It's been thrilling to do this podcast. I thank you, the listeners and the followers, even to continue to watching on nights like tonight where it's West Coast baseball. It's late. The Royals lose. You probably aren't too happy about it, but you still may stay up to listen to what I have to say, or maybe you're going to watch this tomorrow morning to get over the loss after you've had a night's long rest. So don't really judge you on however you choose to watch this podcast, but you know where to find it. You know where to find me. But if you are that new listener, you want to know a little bit more about myself, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do some producing, some co-hosting, and some hosting as well. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But as you know, when you come to this podcast, you click on this link, you get 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And today's 30-minute episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. No better time to get on the action and start placing some bets on your favorite baseball players, and the NBA playoffs are also in full swing. So you might as well start placing some bets on some players there, or just betting on a team to win, maybe the over-unders of that said game. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, how to use your money, but PrizePicks is one way to do it. Well, as I mentioned, not a very fun night in Kansas City or a fun night in Seattle if you are a Royals fan. I know it was Preston Farr that was out there, Royals Miners, on Twitter. Had the chance to go to the game. Was hoping for a better outing from Brady Singer. Didn't really get that great outing that everybody, Royals fan, I guess I should say, was hoping for. But we'll talk a little bit more about him in the second part of our show. And we'll dive into the bullpen, who hasn't looked really that good over the last week. Ever since that Willy Adames 3-run home run last Tuesday, bullpen just hasn't been that great. Very few guys have been lights out, 1, 2, 3 easy innings. Really, Angel Serpa being the only guy of that bunch. Everybody else has seemingly struggled out of the bullpen, but they'll be coming up to close out the show. What I wanted to open tonight's episode with was Nelson Velazquez. I think it's maybe the biggest talking point after tonight's game, and I don't think Velazquez played necessarily terrible. He did have one of the few hits off George Kirby in an inning that the Royals kind of started the rally but got nothing from it. But Nelson Velazquez, to me, as much as I was rooting for him in spring training, as much as I was praising him early on in the season, I just don't know where you can stand with him now. If you are still a supporter moving forward, I would love to hear what's keeping you in it, what's keeping you positive about Nelson Velazquez. Now, I was one of those people last year that really fell in love with the style of which he played with. He had big-time power. You know, he had the, 14, 15 home run stretch in a Royals uniform. He was doing it in like 33, 34 games. Absurd numbers like that. It just, to me, felt like at that point in time, or are we watching something that isn't sustainable for 162? Because as much as the Royals, I think, had some success finding guys that maybe other teams were giving up on, the reality is with those island of misfit toys, if you will, they're not all going to be hits. You're not all going to find great players where some other team couldn't. Right? Nelson Velazquez couldn't play in Chicago, not because they just loaded, unbelievable outfield. It was a good outfield, but he didn't showcase enough that meant he was going to be a 162 player. And I don't think the Royals viewed him as a 162 player. And I don't want to say that I'm completely giving up on him, but the issues that he's had at the plate and the issues that he's had in the field are becoming so noticeable where you have to at least raise the question, is he going to be somebody you count on during the summer months? Is he going to be somebody that plays once every 3 days? Is he going to be somebody you can count on to play maybe 5 days a week? What is Matt Quatrero and Paul Hoover and Keone Duran and Alex Zuma? What are all those guys thinking with how they handle Nelson Velazquez? Now, let me be very clear. I did not come up with this segment idea because of his at-bat against Andres Munoz. Andres Munoz has been diabolical against right-handed hitters this year. He's one of the better bullpen arms in the American League, in my opinion. And when you throw 101, it's going to be really hard to square it up when you also have a 86 to 89 mile an hour slider that is just wipeout. But what I saw in that at bat did at least need to be mentioned in tonight's episode. Nelson Velazquez saw 6 pitches in that at bat. 6 of them were sliders. All of those pitches were sliders. And the book on him right now is don't give him a fastball, right? Don't give him that dead red fastball. And even Jeremy Guthrie tonight in the broadcast said they're kind of doing Nelson Velazquez a favor when he gave up, or George Kirby gave up that single in the 7th inning. You're doing him a favor when you're just throwing him a fastball inside. He's going to be able to have the muscle to just rope that the other way. Early on in the season, the fastball's outside. He was able to poke it out to right field. We just aren't seeing that anymore. We are seeing far more strikeouts. We are seeing basically no walks at this point. And in the field, tonight, oh boy, no errors in Velazquez, but I would say the Mariners were taking just about every single base they could on him. There wasn't much of an arm to worry about out there. And when you ain't hitting, you got to be able to provide something somewhere. Right, we've seen with Hunter Renfroe, though he's not hitting, he's got an arm that has saved a couple runs out there. He's made a couple of nice plays in the outfield. And Velazquez is a young player, and I think trying to find himself at this level. He's trying to figure out how to stay consistent when he's not playing every single day. But this was the talking point I at least gathered after the game. A couple people had sent me over questions. When is it time to demote him? I don't think that's a fix necessarily. That's kind of where I'm at. Demoting Nelson Velazquez doesn't just all of a sudden change this offense. And if you think Drew Waters or Nick Pratto is going to be an immediate fix, I hate to break it to you, but I don't see that being the fix. The Royals do have a problem with this lineup, but I wouldn't say it's a problem that's impossible to fix. I just don't know if it's with some of the guys they have on their bench, or maybe they are playing every single day. Now, we had a episode about Dairon Blanco last week. I think Dairon Blanco has done a really good job over the last 4 to 5 games of filling into a starter's role. Do I believe he's the answer every single day? I don't think so. Maybe right now he's a better option than Hunter Renfroe, but I don't think it's the long-term solution. And for Velazquez, what you do wish could happen, what you hope for, is he taps back into that power. He hasn't homered since the beginning of April. We're coming up on a month and a half now since his last home run. That can't be a version of Nelson Velazquez that's playing every day. He can't have 3 home runs or 2 home runs, 40 some odd games into the season. That can't happen. If he's going to stay on the roster, he has to tap into that power. He has to give you a threat of running into one and putting it over the wall. He doesn't even need to be a high walk rate guy. If he swings and misses a lot, but also can run into 15 to 20 home runs, that's something that you can live with. But right now, there's just not enough to the game that makes it intriguing enough. It is, what I will say, 40-some games. And he's also coming off a multi-hit game. He had a multi-hit game on Sunday, Mother's Day against the Angels, and he had a hit tonight. So it's not like he's been 0 for his last 30. But again, it's the way in which he's getting on base. It's not scorching the ball. It's not finding gaps. It's not running into a couple of home runs. When we saw him go on his tear last year, he's going opposite field home runs. He's just hitting the ball 430-plus feet to left field. He was walking a little bit. You just aren't seeing much of that right now. And it's because the book is out and the league is on him of don't throw him fastballs. I mean, it's just like Pedro Serrano in Major League. He can crush some fastballs when they're put right in the zone, right on the tee. I mean, most guys can, but I mean, he can hit them belt high, a little bit low in the zone, up and in. He's got the bat speed. He's got the quick hands to pull those balls out of the yard. But right now, why give him one? I mean, he's seen a ton of pitches out of the zone, and he's not spitting on them. He's swinging. I think when Andres Munoz came into the game, there was one thing on that report card, if you will. There was one thing on that scouting card. It was, do not throw him a fastball, and you will be able to get him out in this spot. That's what he did. Struck him out on 6 pitches. 6 pitches were sliders. Every single offering was a breaking ball. And until he starts spitting on those, he's not going to see many fastballs. But at this point in the season, I would say J.J. Picollo and I think members of the front office are going to have to ask themselves, is there a better option, or do you feel like there's an easy fix to this? Maybe it's something we'll find out over the next couple weeks or so. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about Brady Singer's outing. Am I discouraged? Am I nervous? Or was I just exhausted after watching that outing? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we dive into Brady Singer's outing, let's give a shout out to one of the sponsors today in Policygenius. Now, Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical claims. So you can check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. Well, Brady Singer didn't look his best tonight. He grinded through another outing, got through 5 innings, threw 108 pitches, but surprisingly only walked 1 Mariner hitter. He struck out 6, but you just walk away from that outing saying that wasn't very good. And I think Brady Singer would say the same thing. He might be proud of himself that I didn't have my best stuff and I didn't spiral. Right? Funny enough, the guy who spiraled the most in outings this year has been Cole Ragans. Now, Cole Ragans had the outing against Baltimore in which he gave up 7 runs and was knocked out at the end of the second inning. He gave up 7 runs against the Angels on Saturday, was the only losing pitcher of that series. So we've seen, in my opinion, the most talented pitcher in the rotation struggle with that a little bit. But Brady Singer tonight, I'm seeing all over Twitter how disappointed people are in him and his lack of, I guess, giving in to the multiple pitch mix. He threw a lot of sinkers, a lot of sliders. And what I've basically come to the conclusion of, Brady Singer is not going to get, I guess, praise, or he's not going to be given the excuses for a bad outing because of the simple fact that he won't throw multiple pitches when he's struggling. And I saw some comments in my post tonight of, you need to move on from him. I'm thinking, well, the guy still has a sub-3 ERA this year. And if I would have said that through 8 or 9 starts for Brady Singer at any point in the season, A 9-start stretch where his ERA is under 3, you would have taken it in a heartbeat because we all viewed Brady Singer as the number 4 starter of this rotation, behind Reagans, behind Lugo, behind Waka. Now, I still believe Brady Singer, talent-wise, is the third best guy in this rotation. I think he's slightly above Alec Marsh and Michael Waka, but it's still a very good 5-man rotation. And tonight, you can certainly call it a lack of efficiency. 108 pitches to get 15 outs is not efficient whatsoever. The weird part is he only walked one. The big issue I had was the 2-strike pitches, the 2-strike offerings. A lot of those were left right over the middle of the plate. And I thought the funny thing tonight was some people were commenting on the stuff. Well, he's not looking good because of his stuff. To me, I don't think it mattered if he had George Kirby stuff tonight. He was leaving everything over the middle of the plate. You do that to a major league hitter, you're going to get burned by it. So to me, it's not about the spin rate. It's not about the movement there. I think that's still fine with Brady Singer. But when you leave that over the middle of the plate, it's going to get crushed. And today, it did. It was not a good outing for him. But on the bright side, he saved an inning or two for that bullpen. It's game 1 of a series against a really good team that I think you'd be fortunate just to grab one. And now you're already down 1-0 in the series. Grabbing the final 2 is going to be a very tall task, considering you see Logan Gilbert tomorrow and then you see Brian Wu on Wednesday. You got Waka tomorrow and then Alec Marsh. The good thing is, though, you didn't have to use John Schreiber or James MacArthur tonight. In my opinion, the 2 best bullpen arms. You did use Angel Serpa, but I'd imagine he would still be available tomorrow. He didn't throw that many pitches in a clean outing. But Brady Singer, I think, considering his stuff wasn't good tonight, and that sounds hypocritical, maybe his plan of attack wasn't good because I can't just say his stuff was bad because I just brought up the point that it was more so about where he was leaving those pitches. So maybe execution was the worst part of his game tonight. And I think that's a fair assessment. I'm just not going to really overreact to the lack of 4-seams, the lack of changeups. It's kind of who Brady Singer is at this point. And when he pitches well, like he did against the Brewers, when he pitches well like he did against the Rangers, you don't really comment too much on it because it was working. And games like tonight, when it's not working, it's easy to point to it and you go, that's why he's never going to be good because he's so stubborn and he won't throw those pitches. If he can get through this season with having a start like this every 4 or 5, I mean, sign me up right now. It's going to happen. You're going to have bad outings. You are going to have outings that get away from you, that just are not going to be good enough to keep you in the game. Honestly, tonight, though, I walk away more so frustrated with the offense than I do Brady Singer. Brady Singer gave up 4 runs in 5 innings. Not good. Not good by any means. But they had a golden opportunity to score in the first inning. And I do wonder how much different it all looks tonight. How differently this game goes if Michael Massey doesn't strike out on 3 pitches with the bases loaded and 1 out in the top of the first. I wonder what happens if Nelson Velazquez doesn't roll over to third base with the bases juiced and 2 outs. Brady Singer, to me, seems like a guy that if you give him a lead, he's going to be able to work with it. He's going to work quickly. He's going to do what he wants to do. But if you get into a pitcher's duel against a guy like George Kirby, who finished 8th in Cy Young voting last year, it's not going to go in his favor. You're not going to expect Brady to hold down a lineup scoreless through 5 innings when your offense is also scoreless through 5 innings. That's for Cole Reagans. That's for Seth Lugo. Michael Waka and Brady Singer and Alec Marsh, those are guys that you want to give them a lead and let them coast with it. A couple of the outings this year for Brady Singer, he's gotten tremendous run support. Tonight, none whatsoever. And that's going to happen. And I get that we can all be frustrated with the stubbornness, but I'm also not going to complain with what I've seen from Brady Singer through the first 9 starts. We were all concerned about what version we were going to get in general. whether it was the 2021 version, 2022, 2023. You just didn't know with Brady Singer. And tonight's outing is not going to make me feel any differently about what he could become, about the type of pitcher that he is. In all reality, when you just box score watch here, you're just looking at the lineup card at the end of the night. Nobody's going to really be talking about 5 innings and 4 earned runs and go, that guy was just flat out terrible. He couldn't do anything right. Not a great start. Didn't work deep enough into the game. But it's not like he gave up 8 runs in 2 innings. It's not like he walked 5 or 6. He just wasn't efficient. Poor execution. It happens. But the offense didn't do him any favors as well. Just felt like an exhausted outing. I walk away going, man, you were sweating yourself watching that outing. It's like, man, 108 pitches through 5 innings. That's grinding it out, and not in the positive way of he really grinded through 7. No, that wasn't really the workman's mentality there. It just looked like a really dragging type of outing. I mean, getting through the 3rd was so difficult, and the 4th and the 5th, base runners on all the time, just wasn't efficient. Now, he will get a start coming up on Sunday, I believe it is, against the Oakland Athletics when the Royals return home. They got 2 more in Seattle. It'll be Michael Wacha tomorrow against Logan Gilbert, and then it will be Alec Marsh going up against Brian Wu before the Royals have an off day on Thursday and come home for the Oakland A's and the Detroit Tigers. Before we move on to our final break and our final segment of the show, a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our final segment, just want to dive in a little bit to the bullpen. Do we feel down about them again? Are we concerned? We'll tell you about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before our final segment, a shout out to the title sponsor today in PrizePicks. Now, with PrizePicks, you're likely fully aware at this point that you've been able to bet on all things in the Major League Baseball season. So don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. You can also get in on the playoff action and run up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. Again, that's with PrizePicks. Use our code of LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for a first deposit match of $100. Along with Brady Singer's shaky outing tonight, it was another shaky outing for the Royals bullpen. Or maybe I should just say Chris Stratton, because Angel Serpa and Tyler Duffy honestly were pretty good. No complaints about Tyler Duffy. He had a clean inning. And then Angel Serpa still running it up 96, 97 miles an hour. Had a traditional 5-pitch strikeout because the zone was just so inconsistent and off tonight. Not the reason the Royals lost, but sometimes you just chuckle at how bad some guys can be at their job. Chris Stratton, though, gave up a 2-run home run to Ty France, who turns into Babe Ruth every time he faces the Kansas City Royals pitching staff. And it just made me think a little bit about this bullpen and the week they've had. Not good. A lot of long balls given up. That goes back to that Willy Adames 3-run home run last Tuesday night at Kauffman Stadium against the Milwaukee Brewers. Willie Calhoun had a home run against James MacArthur in Sunday's game. The bullpen also got knocked around a bit on Saturday in that loss to the Angels. Nearly got knocked around a little bit in that game 1 on Thursday night. Matt Sauer wasn't very sharp. Daniel Lynch was, but he's back in Omaha. They had to option him for Alec Marsh. It just hasn't been a good week. And I believe we've said this on the show before, and I'm just going to reiterate it because I think it makes a lot of sense with this bullpen. I'm not sure this bullpen is ever going to get to the level of top 5 status and just stay there. I don't envision that happening. Could be wrong. Hope to be wrong. We've discussed about the lack of strikeouts of this bullpen, the lack of high-powered guys. They don't have many right now, if any at all. I mean, the hardest throwing guy in that bullpen feels like Angel Serpa, who throws it consistently now at 96, 97. And I would say Matt Sauer, but that might just be for a couple of pitches that he can run it up to 97, 98, at times 99. For the most part, it's sitting down 93, 94. And with this bullpen, though they can't reach that status of top 5 and just hang around there all season long, I think there will be stretches this bullpen can be a top 5 bullpen. We've already seen it so far this year. I think you're going to see some 20-inning scoreless streaks. I think you're also going to see weeks like this one where you just don't really trust anybody who comes out to the mound. You just don't have that full confidence of this is going to be a quick outing. I mean, don't leave your seat. Don't grab another beer because this is going to be done in a minute and a half or 2 minutes. I mean, John Schreiber has been ERA-wise the best guy in this bullpen, and from time to time, he battles with a few base runners on. It's not a clean, perfect 1, 2, 3 outing. He's just the best at getting out of those high leverage spots. That's why they call him Johnny Leverage. But I do wonder with this group if that will be good enough for this Royals team to make a playoff push. If their bullpen can just be streaky. The risk you run is that you kind of have to roll the dice that when they're really on, when they're really good, everything else is clicking. So you can have those 7-game winning streaks, those 9 of 10s, those 12 of 16s. That starting rotation is doing well. They're just handing it off to the bullpen, and they're locking down the game. Or is it going to be a scenario where rotation's doing well, offense is doing well, but the bullpen just can't have a good night, can't slam the door? And will that cost this team in the long run? Now, I don't think this is a bad bullpen. I think it's a middle-of-the-pack bullpen in the American League and translates to middle of the pack in all of Major League Baseball. It's not going to be good enough to make a deep playoff push, but I think everybody in Kansas City is just fine with getting your foot in the door. Maybe get to the deadline where you can upgrade a little bit. You're just not going to be able to wow the opposition or overwhelm the opposition with Chris Stratton. You're not going to be able to overwhelm the opposition with Nick Anderson, with Tyler Duffy, with even at times a John Schreiber and James MacArthur and Angel Serpa. There are good arms in this bullpen, but we also see the best of the best out there. I mean, tonight, a perfect example. The Royals were overwhelmed by Andres Munoz. They don't have a Munoz in that bullpen. They don't have a Yohan Duran. They don't have a Yenier Cano in Baltimore. Somebody that you just go, oh, no, not this guy. They've got guys that when they're going well, you look up at those numbers and go, this is not somebody good to face. But the bullpen's just, they're going to have outings like this, and they might have multiple weeks like this. You just hope it gets nipped in the bud at a week. That hopefully tomorrow, Michael Walker gives you a quality start. He hands it off to the bullpen, who can protect a 2 to 3 run lead, and you get out of Seattle at minimum with 1 win, and you will secure a winning road trip. And to that point in the season, which will be May 14th, you haven't been swept. You're at least in danger right now, and it wasn't because of the bullpen. Bullpen just having the bad week. They haven't been as sharp. They fought their command a little bit. Left a lot of pitches out over the middle. Sound familiar? We talked about that with Brady Singer a lot more than we have in the past. It keeps going back to the point of the Royals don't have a lot of swing and miss in that bullpen. They don't have a lot of high velocity, high power guys in the back end. Not saying it's impossible to win without any of those guys, but it can make it easier with some of those guys. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Tomorrow, we are going to talk a little bit more about this upcoming start with Michael Wacha. Going to have an episode not coming out in the early morning hours. This West Coast baseball is really throwing everything off, but only 2 more games to go with that. And then we might also dive into some of these numbers with Alec Marsh. He has been just much better than advertised. Even though he missed some time with the injury, boy, was he fantastic against the Angels, and curious what he's going to look like in that finale against the Mariners. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.